Welcome back to Reddit Story Time. Today we have 4 incredible stories. Let's dive right in.
Story number 1. Developer demanded my land for electricity, so I removed every single pole. I guess no more electric poles. This is a masterclass in malicious compliance. A godfather owns a small cattle ranch out in the countryside. About 20 to 25 years ago, he needed electricity to power a water pump for his cows. The nearest connection to the grid was on the opposite side of the ranch, about a mile and a half away. So he paid out of his own pocket to have utility poles installed across his property. A significant investment. Sometime later, a few neighbors on the far side of the ranch asked if they could piggyback off his electrical line. He agreed. They paid to install additional poles, and everything worked perfectly for roughly 20 years. Fiber optic cable was even added later. Then the trouble started. A real estate developer bought the land on the other side of the ranch and began preparing it for a cottage development. They did not exactly start on the right foot. They complained about the animals, the smell, and the noise from tractors. The godfather's response was perfect. If you choose to live next to a working ranch, you have to accept that ranching will be happening there. Then the developer discovered a problem. 2 miles of 20-year-old electrical cable worked fine for a few farmhouses, but it could not supply the 10 to 15 cottages they planned to build. They approached the electric company about upgrading the infrastructure, and that is when everyone discovered that the poles crossing the ranch were privately owned. The electric company and the developer gave the godfather 2 choices. Allow them to replace his poles with concrete ones and grant a permanent right-of-way across his ranch for maintenance, or remove the poles. So that Sunday, the godfather got on his tractor and pulled out every single pole, everyone. The developer, who had already promised buyers that electricity was included, now faces installing 3 or 4 miles of entirely new poles at their own expense. And the godfather's parting shot. He jokingly mentioned how unusually hot this summer has been. Purely a coincidence, of course. The verdict here is instant karma. You do not get to move next to a ranch, complain about the ranch, and then demand free use of the rancher's private infrastructure. When given the choice between surrendering his land rights and removing the poles, he chose option 2 and left the developer to deal with the consequences. And the verdict, instant karma.
Story number 2. Neighbor gave me a shrub, then claimed I planted it over her water line. We had a good dynamic going until I planted a shrub she gave us. A couple bought their home less than a year ago and immediately connected with their neighbor, a 75-year-old woman who lived alone. They enjoyed plants and gardening just like the neighbor. The relationship started warm. They helped her trim trees, offered to keep an eye on her garage code in case she fell, and exchanged phone numbers. She would text them when they left their garage door open. Friendly, brief, nice. The neighbor even gave them plants from her yard that had gotten too large. One spring day, she gave them a chunk of a shrub she wanted to get rid of. They dug it out together, and our narrator planted it immediately since it was bare root. That same evening, the trouble began. The neighbor approached and said she thought they had planted the shrub over her water line. She also added that the spot did not have enough sun for the plant. 2 things immediately stood out to our narrator. First, why would her water line be on someone else's property? Second, the second complaint about sunlight was suspicious. It felt like she was piling on reasons to object to where they planted a shrub on their own property, a shrub she had given them. Our narrator was furious. They pulled the shrub out of the ground, walked to a nearby park, and threw it into the woods. Done, but they did not stop there. They called the city and requested a formal utility line marking. They specifically asked the city to mark both their property and the neighbor's property lines, so everyone would know exactly where things stood. The city came out, marked the lines, and the result was definitive. The neighbor's water line was nowhere near where the shrub had been planted. It was at least 5 feet away from the property line. Our narrator sent the neighbor a polite message confirming the markings were complete and that thankfully they had not planted over her water line. The neighbor had been making it up. She had given them a plant, then tried to control where they put it on their own property by inventing a water line claim. The property survey exposed the lie completely. The verdict is not the asshole. You do not get to gift someone a plant and then claim authority over where they planted on their own land, especially when the claim turns out to be completely fabricated.
And the verdict, not the asshole.
Story number 3. HOA board member's husband uses my driveway as his personal turnaround. Can an HOA do anything about problematic neighbors? Our narrator has neighbors whose guests constantly block their driveway. They brought this up before, but it keeps happening every single time the neighbors have company. A few weeks ago, a guest blocked the driveway yet again, and our narrator finally snapped and sent the wife an angry text about it. That is when things escalated. Instead of fixing the problem, the husband started using our narrator's driveway as his personal turnaround. He drives onto the property, does a loop, and drives back out 5 or 6 times a day. There are tire marks all over the driveway from the repeated trespassing. Our narrator has security camera footage of every single incident. It is clearly intentional. This man is driving onto someone else's property without permission, repeatedly, as retaliation for being asked to stop blocking the driveway. And here is the kicker. The wife is now a member of the HOA board. She got that position despite the fact that this family took the HOA to City Hall over a parking law dispute and lost. Our narrator is in a difficult spot. They want to send a complaint to the HOA, but the neighbor's wife sits on the board and might have access to confidential complaints. Both the husband and wife work for law firms, so they likely have free legal advice and feel untouchable. The entitlement is staggering. Block someone's driveway, get called out for it, and then retaliate by trespassing on their property multiple times per day. The verdict is not the asshole. This is textbook trespassing. It is documented on camera, and being on the HOA board does not give your family license to use someone else's property however they please. Our narrator has every right to involve law enforcement with that footage in hand.
And the verdict, not the asshole.
Story number 4. 21 years of neighbor hell, drugs, graffiti, and harassment. 21 years with the worst neighbors on earth. This is an epic saga of suburban warfare that spans over 2 decades. In early 2005, a family bought a home in a quiet Pacific Northwest town. They had moved from California, drawn by large lots, lower taxes, and small town charm. The neighbors to the south seemed fine at first. A well-kept yard, a nice house, 2 cars. Nothing seemed amiss. But within weeks, something felt profoundly wrong. The homeowner noticed almost immediately that something illegal was going on next door. Either these folks had a remarkable number of friends visiting at all hours of day and night, or they were running an illicit operation. The answer was drugs. The household consisted of an older couple in their 60s living with their adult twin sons, both in their late 30s. The parents were not rude, but they made zero effort to be friendly. The foot traffic, bike traffic, and vehicle traffic at all hours was relentless. After a few months, the homeowner went to the police. The officer confirmed they were well aware of the situation and that a joint task force was working a case. Over the years, the homeowner watched the brothers get arrested repeatedly. Drugs, theft, and worse. But they never stayed in jail longer than 4 or 5 months. Their parents always welcomed them home. Then the harassment began. Racist graffiti appeared regularly. Swastikas, racial slurs, crude drawings, all spray painted on the streets around the home. The local newspaper even wrote about it. The brothers would blast music with racially charged lyrics from their backyard, seemingly for the entire neighborhood to hear. But the direct harassment was worse. Unsolicited magazine subscriptions arrived with the homeowner's name listed as a racial slur, property damage, intimidation. This went on for over 20 years. The homeowner documented everything, mining years of emails, texts, and news articles to build a complete record. 2 decades of living next to a family that operated a drug den, covered the streets with hate symbols, and personally targeted their neighbor with harassment. The verdict is not the asshole, obviously. No one should have to endure 21 years of this. The homeowner's patience and documentation are extraordinary, and the fact that this family operated with near impunity for so long is a failure of the system. But the record stands, and the story serves as a warning about just how bad neighbor situations can get when the authorities cannot or will not act.
And the verdict, not the asshole.
That's all for today. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more. See you next time.